The sky was a shifting ocean of violet and gold, as the towering spires of the Empress's citadel cast long shadows over the assembled crowd of thousands. The air trembled with anticipation as the armored warriors of the Imperial Guard lined the grand platform where the Empress herself stood, a figure of impossible beauty, her radiant form glowing with ethereal energy, her piercing eyes locked onto the lone figure before her. A single human stood at the foot of the platform, his tattered clothes fluttering in the whispering breeze of the alien world. He was unarmored, his face weathered but resolute, his stance unwavering. Despite the tremendous power that radiated from the Empress and her warriors, the gathered nobles of the court sneered and murmured among themselves, their expressions twisted in contempt at the sight of such an insignificant being daring to stand before their ruler. The Empress stepped forward, her elaborate gown of shimmering light cascading around her form as her voice echoed across the courtyard like the chime of celestial bells. Her words resonated not just in sound, but in the very fabric of reality itself, bending the essence of the air around her. The human should have crumbled, should have faltered, under the weight of her presence. But he merely stared up at her, his expression unyielding. He was a challenger. The Empress narrowed her eyes as silence fell across the vast court. No mortal, no creature of flesh and blood, had ever dared challenge her sovereignty. And yet, this human stood before her with a confidence that defied logic. His kind were weak, his kind were fragile, yet something in his stance, in his gaze, in the fire that burned behind his eyes, unsettled her. She lifted a single hand, the very motion sending a ripple through space itself. The warriors who lined the court tensed their hands, gripping weapons that shimmered with deadly light. The nobles leaned forward, their jeweled garments glinting in the twilight. A duel against the Empress herself was not merely a battle, it was a spectacle, a declaration of supremacy, a reminder to all that she was the eternal sovereign of this world. The human did not flinch. Power coiled around the Empress, a storm of light and fury, a force that had obliterated civilizations, reduced entire fleets to dust. Yet the human stepped forward, defying the impossible. The nobles gasped, the warriors bristled. The Empress herself felt something unfamiliar stir within her. This was no ordinary defiance, no simple rebellion. This was something more. The human raised a single hand, mirroring her gesture. No weapon, no shield, no armor. Just his presence, just his will. The Empress felt her breath hitch, something about the way he moved, the way he met her gaze. As if he could see through the layers of power and divinity that surrounded her. For the first time in millennia, she hesitated. The challenge had been accepted, the duel had begun, and the air between them grew dense with the clash of unseen forces. The Empress wove her power into a tapestry of destruction, a force that could unravel the very fabric of existence. The human stepped through it, his form untouched, his will unbroken. The court was silent, the warriors frozen in disbelief. He was resisting. The Empress pressed forward, her movements a blur of divine elegance and overwhelming power. Each strike was a tempest, each motion a cataclysm, yet he countered with nothing but sheer presence, sheer defiance. His movements were unorthodox, not a warrior, not a sorcerer, yet something else entirely. She felt frustration, something she had not known for eons, creeping into her mind. How could this be? Their battle became a dance, a symphony of light and motion as the ground trembled beneath their clash. The human never wavered, never faltered. The nobles looked on, eyes wide with disbelief. The warriors gripped their weapons, but none dared intervene. This was something beyond their comprehension. The Empress felt her heart pound something foreign, yet familiar. It was not rage, it was not fear, it was something deeper, something dangerous. His presence, his defiance, was seeping into her mind, twisting the certainty that had defined her existence. She pushed harder, her attacks growing more desperate, more furious. He met each one with unwavering resolve. Then it happened. A single misstep, a single opening, and he was there before her, closer than any had ever dared. The Empress felt the heat of his breath, felt the intensity of his gaze. Her power wavered just for a moment, just long enough for him to reach forward to touch her hand. The world stopped. The Empress gasped, an unfamiliar sensation flooding through her veins. This was not pain. This was not defeat. It was something else, something terrifying. Understanding. The human stepped back, leaving only silence between them. The Empress looked down at her own hand where he had touched her, as if expecting it to dissolve, to fracture under the weight of what had just transpired. But it remained whole. She remained whole, and yet she was changed. The nobles held their breath. The warriors remained frozen. The very world itself seemed to wait for her response. The Empress lifted her gaze to the human who had defied her, who had stood against the impossible, who had reached through eternity and touched something she had long forgotten. The challenge was over, and she had lost.